I want the boy out of here, that's all I care about. Why? Because I do.
Man, Netflix has really been crushing it lately with the original content. There is so much good stuff up there right now that it almost makes up for the fact that the platform is going to be losing The Office in the future. Almost. Okay, not really, but you know, close enough. And whoo-we! They really hit it out of the park with Extraction, the bombastic action flick starring Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. If you haven't seen this movie yet, you definitely need to. It is easily one of the best action films out there today, in my opinion. Personally, I would put it up there with the likes of John Wick, at least in terms of the sheer awesomeness of its action. It really has some brutal stuff. And you definitely should watch it before this video, by the way, because I'm about to spoil the crap out of it. There's a lot of little stuff about Extraction that many audience members might not have known about while watching the movie. So you just know that I'm gonna talk about it. Cause you know, that's kind of what I do around here. From behind the scenes tidbits, visual metaphors, and even a cute little chipmunk thing, these are some of the details that you might have missed while watching Extraction. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start this video off with a bit of a softball, but one that you'd be surprised to learn not many people actually know about. At least not the kind of people who just discovered the movie via the front page of Netflix. Extraction might just seem like a random action movie to most people. It hasn't exactly been marketed as anything more than that. But did you know that someone who was partially responsible for the biggest film of all time penned the script? That's right, Extraction was written by Joe Russo, one half of the directing team behind not only Captain America: The Winter Soldier, but Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and, of course, Avengers: Endgame. That is also how Chris Hemsworth wound up getting involved, since the actor wanted to take on a role that was a bit more grounded than playing a superhero based upon a Norse god, though he still wanted to keep things in the realm of frantic action. Luckily, Joe Russo had the hookup, and now we have Tyler Rake, professional butt kicker. Now, Joe Russo didn't just randomly decide to write an awesome action film one day just because he was bored, though I wouldn't really put that past him, to be honest. He actually had some prior history with the story. See, something that you might not know is that Extraction is actually based upon a graphic novel entitled Ciudad that was published back in 2014. This hyper-violent comic was actually co-written by both of the Russo brothers and renowned comic author Andy Parks. The difference between the graphic novel and the film are relatively minor, with the largest being the change in setting. While the film takes place in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, the book is set halfway across the globe in Ciudad del Este, the second largest city in the South American country of Paraguay. Oh, and there's also the fact that instead of rescuing a young man, in the book, Rake rescues a young woman. Details, details. Sadly, the book appears to be out of print right now, so if you see a chance to pick it up, new or used, it might be worth checking out. Ciudad was always something that the Russos wanted to see adapted into a film, and Extraction wasn't the first time that they tried to get it made. Some of you might not really be aware of this, but the Russos had a long history of working on popular, cult favorite comedy television shows before becoming some of the driving forces behind the MCU that they wound up being, with the last one being their tenure on Community. When their time on that show was coming to an end, the two were trying to figure out what they wanted to do next, and Ciudad quickly became their project of choice. Originally, they both intended to direct it themselves. However, as production on that film wasn't going very far, and with the MCU taking up more and more of their time, they shelved the idea, and now, here we are. While the Russo brothers didn't wind up directing the film themselves, they did keep it in the family, as it were. Extraction wound up being directed by Sam Hargrave, making his directorial debut. If you are as big of a fan of both Marvel and nerding out over IMDb listings as I am, you might just recognize the name. Hargrave has been a professional stunt performer for roughly 15 years, having worked on numerous entries in the MCU, including serving as Captain America's stunt double in the first Avengers film and The Winter Soldier. He then became the stunt coordinator on Captain America: Civil War and continued in that role for both Infinity War and Endgame. So needless to say, he had a pretty solid working relationship with both Joe and Anthony Russo. So having him direct the action-filled Extraction was an easy choice to make. Regarding the Russos, Hargrave has nothing but good things to say about them. stating on numerous occasions that they had become like mentors to him during his time on the Avengers films. Now, if during that last entry you got the sneaking suspicion that you had seen Sam Hargrave somewhere before, you most certainly have. At least you have if you've actually watched Extraction, which if you haven't, what are you even doing watching this video? Go watch it and then come back to this. But yeah, Hargrave is actually in the movie. And it's not just a super short one and done cameo like Joe Russo's was in Endgame. Oh no, it's a relatively big role. Relatively. He still isn't around for very long. Hargrave played the mercenary who was sent in with Rake on the mission. You know, the sniper guy with the big bushy beard. Despite his character's rather grisly end, Hargrave had a good sense of humor about it, pointing out that, as a stuntman, he was used to characters he played biting it on the big screen, and even joked that he should make it a tradition in films he directs to take himself out in more and more gruesome ways. So look for that in any future flicks that he helms. Now, on professional sets, there are a lot of rules about who can do what, due largely to the rules that are set forth by the many different guilds that cover the different roles on set. For instance, in most cases, the only people who can even touch the cameras are members of the cinematography team. Not even directors are supposed to operate cameras. However, on the set of Extraction, director Sam Hargrave got the chance to man the camera a few different times, including during one of the most awesome moments in the film. When Saju and Rake brawl for the first time, the fight begins as the two stumble off of a balcony to the street below. As they fall, the camera follows them, jumping down as well. During that moment, Hargrave channeled all of his experience as a stuntman, grabbed what is probably the most expensive piece of gear on set, and leapt off of the balcony himself. That just had to have the film's insurance company sweating something fierce. But it led to an awesome shot, and nothing broke. So I say that it was completely worth it. In fact, during that entire sequence, the chase through Dhaka, Hargrave was usually the one behind the lens. This is due largely to how they wanted this sequence to play out. As what effectively serves as a one-shot action sequence, Hargrave didn't want a bunch of jump cuts interrupting the action. So everyone involved had to push themselves to the limit, including Hargrave and star Chris Hemsworth. Believe it or not, those shots from inside the car were not done via green screen trickery. The two leads were actually there, in the car, speeding through the streets, nearly missing stunt performers who were diving out of the way of the moving vehicle, which Hemsworth noted was rather nerve-wracking. Understandable. That's some pretty scary stuff. But probably not as scary as the situation Hargrave found himself in. Since the normal kind of camera cars that would be used during car chase sequences couldn't fit through the tight streets, Hargrave instead grabbed the camera and strapped himself to the hood of a smaller car, which again was speeding down a packed street. That is nuts. Given the rather frantic and intense action sequences in this film, Chris Hemsworth had to put in a lot of work during rehearsals. In fact, Hemsworth has said in interviews that Extraction took the most amount of time of rehearsals out of any film that he's worked on to date. So that means that he spent longer working on the action sequences in this movie than any of the times that he played the God of Thunder for Marvel. And all of that work paid off in ways other than just nailing the action, as Hemsworth has also said that all of this has left him in better shape than he's ever been in. Yeah, the guy who normally looks like that says that this film has made him even more fit. Probably true, all things considered, at least if the reaction to his look on social media is to be believed. In addition to being in peak physical shape, Extraction also sees Chris Hemsworth looking a bit more tattooed than most movie fans are used to seeing. While a few of them are ones that he actually has, the neck tattoos are custom pieces specifically for this film. So what do they represent? What's the point in them? Well, according to Joe Russo, the 3 arrows that Tyler Rake has on his neck largely represent his philosophy on life, the way that he approaches things. See, Rake is a man who's pretty straightforward about stuff, and he's often the first one into rather sticky situations. So the points of the arrow are sort of a visual metaphor for this. It's one of those things that you wouldn't really just pick up on while watching the film. Thankfully, that's what behind the scenes info is for. Chris Hemsworth is not just a charming actor. He is also a family man. having 3 young children with his wife Elsa Pataki. As a working actor, it is often hard to spend time with your children, but Hemsworth has always made it a priority, and as such has made a habit out of bringing his family with him whenever he's off shooting on location. However, logistics made this difficult for Extraction, so Hemsworth had to spend 3 months away from his loved ones. He subsequently took the emotional energy he had from missing his children and channeled that into the scene where he opened up to the kid. And honestly, you can really see it all laid out there, as he performed that scene beautifully, in my opinion. Despite obviously having the most screen time, being the lead and all that, Rake is not actually the character who gets the most setup. Sure, he got that aforementioned emotional moment with the kid, but beyond that, we never really learn all too much about him. Saju, on the other hand, got quite a bit of setup. Joe Russo has pointed out in interviews that he wrote the script that way for 2 major reasons. First, and probably most important, is the fact that for most of the film, Saju is largely an antagonist, serving as a foil for Rake. So, for his shift at the end to be fully believable and more emotionally impactful, he needed to be a bit more fleshed out. And second was the fact that Rake was always meant to be a pretty basic character, modeled after many of the famous 80s action stars. So he didn't really need a ton of setup for us to connect to him. There is one scene early on, however, that goes a long way towards giving us a basic feel for who Rake is, and that is his first interaction with Nick Khan. At first glance, it's your basic recruitment scene. Hey, we need you to come back and do a mission. Nah, I'm good, but we'll pay. Oh, okay then. But pay close attention to the character's clothing in this scene, specifically the difference between them. Rake is looking pretty haggard. His clothing is worn and dirty, while Nick is extremely well put together. This is something that Joe Russo and Sam Hargrave have stated that they did on purpose in order to illustrate the differences between their lives. These two are basically partners. They're on the same level. And yet, Rake has in many ways left the fancier parts of life behind. He has abandoned that part of the mercenary lifestyle. So much said with just some simple costuming. You know that really hard to watch scene where a kid is thrown off the roof for stealing from a mirror? Who expected a freaking kid to be taken out? Certainly not me. Anyways, near the end of that scene, there is a seemingly random shot of a little rodent chilling out near the edge of the building. According to Hargrave, the little guy kept hanging around on set while they were filming, curious about exactly what was going on. The director joked that the rodent was so insistent to be involved with the production that he might as well just put him into the picture, hence why that shot was kept in. I wonder if it was paid the standard rate for extras. Joe Russo and Sam Hargrave are self-proclaimed cinephiles, meaning they absolutely live and breathe movies, which is probably a good thing considering what they do for a living. But because of this love for cinema, the two took a lot of inspiration from some of their favorite films for certain parts of Extraction. One of the most notable bits of inspiration has to be in the way that Rake winds up in worse and worse condition as the film goes on. A lot of the times in action movies, the hero just kinda shrugs off wounds for the most part, but not Rake. This is pretty similar to John McClane from Die Hard, who is arguably one of the most believable action heroes. Seriously, that dude gets totally messed up. And heck, at the end of the film during the shootout on the bridge, some of the moments are very similar to something you might see in a Sergio Leone western, with the heroes each having last stand type moments, ending in some rather tragic ways. Okay, so now it's time that we talk about that last shot and what it could mean. As the kid comes up from the bottom of the pool after all of the badness has blown over, off in the distance, out of focus, we can see a blurry figure that appears to be Rake watching over the kid before it cuts to black. Now this has obviously had people talking since the film debuted. Is that figure actually Rake? Does that mean that he somehow survived getting shot in the throat and then falling into the river? You know, when you actually say it out loud, it seems pretty unlikely. But hey, there he was. Maybe. According to Joe Russo, the ending was always meant to be ambiguous. He didn't want to outwardly say that Rake was alive, or I guess dead for that matter either, as he felt that it was best for audiences to take what they wanted from the end. Though he did state that, personally, he looked at it as Rake almost watching over the kid, meant to represent that he had a future, and that despite the horrible ordeal that he had gone through, everything was going to be okay for him moving forward. But what do you think about that ending? Is Rake alive, or is that figure a spooky ghost man? Let me know in the comments. Those are the details that I caught while watching Extraction. Were there any that I missed? Let me know down in the comments below. I'll be hanging out down there for a while when this video finally gets posted. And while you're down there, why not consider subscribing to ScreenRant for even more awesome videos just like this. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.